So yeah, as the others have said, a bit of a change of pace now. We're going to have a food session from the charity Food Matters. So I've got Freya and Izzy here, and they're going to look at food for fuel, eating well for being active. So I would like to welcome Izzy and Freya.
Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, we are from Food Matters, and we are running a food for fuel session. So as I said, it's going to be a little bit of a change of pace. I heard you had a very active morning, so I'm sure you'll be kind of happy of the opportunity just to kind of sit back a little bit, kind of listen to some of the information that we're going to go through with you. But first of all, I'll just start off by kind of introducing myself properly, and then I'll hand over to Izzy to do the same. So my name is Freya Harrop. I'm a registered associate nutritionist. My role at Food Matters is project officer and nutritionist, and we work across, or I work across the kind of community cookery and food education. Some of my interests, just so you know, we can make it a little bit more personal. I enjoy lots of hiking and camping, and also foraging as well. So I'll pass over to Izzy.
Hi everyone, my name's Izzy. I work with Freya on the same project, so on community cookery and food education. And I'm a project officer at Food Matters, and in my spare time I like knitting, baking and swimming in the sea. And we at Food Matters are all about making healthy, tasty and sustainable food available to everyone everywhere. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the session is going to run today. Before I get onto that though, we're just going to do a quick poll to gauge how confident you are in your knowledge around eating for being physically active. So everyone should be able to see that poll. Any thumbs up if you can? Great, we've got some answers coming in, so that looks good. So 1 being not confident at all, 5 being very confident, and everything in between. Great. So you've had quite a few responses now. So any last minute answers? I'm just going to end the poll. Great. So it looks like we've got some not confident at all. We've got a few on number 2, and then most people are in the middle on number 3, but we haven't got any 4s or 5s, no super confident yet. So hopefully we can kind of shift that a little bit through the session. And while I'm just describing what we're going to do today, if you wanted to share in the chat your favourite foods or your favourite go-to meals, so we can get an idea of what kind of foods you like to eat, that would be great. So today we're going to look at what makes a healthy and balanced diet, the different kind of food groups, and then we're also going to look at some common misconceptions around eating for physical activity. What are some myths around food for fuel that we can bust together? After that, we're going to look at a delicious recipe. We're going to demo that for you today. That's cheesy oat squares. And you should have the recipe in your Carers Active April pack, so you can make those at home. And it's a really good on-the-go recipe that can keep you full for quite a long time, and it's good before exercise too. And then lastly, we're going to look at how to put our new knowledge into practice. What are some of the barriers we might face, and how to overcome those so that we can really eat to be active. And if any questions come up, please put those in the chat. We'll do our best today to answer them, but if not, we will have the chat saved so we can pass on any outstanding answers to Carers Active, and they can pass them on to you. We will be doing a few polls, and I know that when you share results, sometimes they can stick around on your screen for a while, so it might be a good idea just to keep an eye on that, and then you can close it when you want to. Okay, so that's all the housekeeping. Back to you, Freya.
Okay. Thank you for going through that with us. Oh, I'm just having the poll jump up a little bit. Okay, so let me move us on to the first part of our session. So this is, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, just because I want to focus a little bit more on kind of how we can put this into practice, especially relating to movement as well, which is what, you know, this whole kind of day is about. So this is the Eat Well guide. You might have seen it before in kind of schools, GP surgeries, hospitals, things like that, but it's basically the kind of government recommendation on what we need to include to have a kind of varied and balanced diet, kind of aiming for this roughly over a day or over a few days. There are a few different variations of the Eat Well guide, so it might not be that this kind of standard kind of government issue might not be right for you. So there is the vegan Eat Well guide as well. Also the South Asian Eat Well guide by Freya J. And also the African and Caribbean Eat Well guide by the Diverse Nutrition Association. So I'm just going to break this down a little bit, because I'm aware that it's probably quite small on your screen as well. And as I said, I'll go through this quite quickly, but we'll kind of come back to all of this information as we go through how we can relate it to the physical activity that we're going to be doing. So most of us have probably heard that kind of 5-a-day recommendation. But just making sure that we can kind of get lots of different colors to kind of give us all the vitamins, minerals and antioxidants that we need. Also gives us the fiber to kind of help feed our gut microbiome or gut bacteria, and kind of helps keep us full for longer as well. And if we need something that's slightly more affordable, kind of going for the frozen or the tinned options as well are absolutely fine. We've also got our protein section, so our animal and plant-based proteins. So we need it for tissue growth and repair. So whether that's kind of cuts or grazes, things like that, but also kind of building and maintaining our muscles. So particularly important kind of during movement. But just to be aware, we want to be kind of reducing our red and processed meat. Just because they are associated with kind of different health conditions, and also remembering to include our oily fish as well, so including that omega-3. And that is partly because you know, it's really important for reducing things like cholesterol, but also because it's really important for our mental health as well, and kind of maintaining mood. So something that we focus a lot on at Food Matters is how to kind of, you know, how does food relate to our mood? So I will kind of refer to that a little bit throughout, but also remembering as well with the protein section, as I said, that there are plant-based proteins as well. So things like chickpeas or lentils and nuts and things like that as well. And then we've got our dairy and dairy alternatives. So most of us know that we kind of need this for our calcium and our vitamin D and iodine as well, which is really important for our teeth and bones. So particularly as we're getting older as well, kind of maintaining the strength in our bones. We also do need calcium for muscle contraction as well. So it is really, really important for just day-to-day life, but also exercise as well. Always kind of aiming for a kind of lower fat and lower sugar. So just checking the kind of back of label information as well. If you don't eat dairy, again, just making sure that those products are fortified. So when something's fortified, it just means that it's had those kind of nutrients added in. So for example, a soya milk, or if it's fortified, it will have the kind of the calcium, the vitamin D, and the iodine. I can see someone is asking about celiacs as well, kind of a celiac option. That's actually something I'm not aware of, but I can look into that and see if there's another kind of option or kind of, you know, more information on that, because I'm sure there is, but I can kind of look into that. I've just seen that can everyone hear me okay? Because I can see that someone's kind of struggling to hear. There was a message about struggling to hear. Yeah, okay, brilliant. I'll try and speak a little bit louder and a little bit closer just to make sure. Okay, so let's move on to the next then. So starchy carbohydrates as well. So this is, as you can see, it's kind of a similar size, or well, it's the same size. They're kind of fruit and veg, so it's a really kind of important part of a balanced diet. Carbohydrates have had a bit of a kind of a bad rep, which is unfortunate, because they are a kind of main source of energy, and particularly during exercise, they are really, really important. And again, it's kind of really good source of fiber. So, you know, feeding our kind of gut bacteria, helping keep us regular, things like that. We want to be aiming for complex carbohydrates, so kind of whole meals, whole grains, oats, rye, pearl barley, kind of brown rice, those kinds of things. And research actually shows that people who eat carbohydrates kind of before exercising actually perform much better than people who haven't kind of had carbohydrates before a meal. But just to be aware as well, if you are increasing your fibre intake, just to do it gradually, just because it does take a little while for our kind of gut bacteria and also just our gut in general to kind of get used to that. So you just want to be making sure that you're not kind of having any adverse reactions to the kind of quick increase in fibre. It just does take a little bit of time to adjust. Okay. We've then got, oh, sorry, my slides just been a little bit slow. There we go. So we've then got our kind of fat section. As you can see, it's kind of quite a small sliver on the Eat Well guide, and that's just because we don't need that much of it. But it is really important. It kind of helps keep us full for longer. If we're kind of having unsaturated fats as well, it's actually good for kind of reducing things like cholesterol. Yeah, just improving heart health, but obviously wanting to kind of avoid the saturated fats or the kind of trans fats. So a good way to kind of work out what's what. If something is liquid at room temperature, it's probably an unsaturated fat, so the one that you want to be kind of aiming for. Then we've got our kind of corner foods, which if you kind of remember back to the Eat Well plate or the Eat Well guide, they weren't actually on the kind of the main circle of the guide, and that's because we don't actually need them in our diet, but they are things that we all enjoy. So just kind of trying to have those a little bit less often and in small amounts. We then got a water recommendation as well, so aiming for roughly 1.5 to 2 litres per day. That is just a kind of on average. You might notice that if you're doing a little bit more exercise or more kind of movement that day, that you're going to need a little bit more. Juice, tea and coffee do count towards that, but sports drinks, we don't necessarily need them unless you're kind of exercising for an hour and a half or more. So the reason that sports drinks were kind of developed is because they contain salts, the electrolytes, and some sugar as well, which can be beneficial to kind of replace what you're losing during exercise. But as I said, unless you're doing your really long kind of intense workout, you don't really need anything other than water. And actually, if we're not kind of using those nutrients in the sports drinks, they're not necessarily healthy for us. So just to kind of bear that in mind. So just as a bit of a summary then, so we've just looked at the Eat Well guide, so we've kind of gone through all the different sections and you can see how it all kind of comes together there. And as I said, kind of aiming for this over the course of a day or a few days. You don't need kind of every single meal to look like this. It's kind of not as rigid as that. So starting to kind of focus then on exercise. I know that you've been kind of doing lots this morning and you're going to kind of continue with that after lunch. So I'm sure that these things have already been mentioned, so I won't kind of dwell on them too much, but just to kind of highlight the kind of varied benefits of including exercise as part of, a kind of healthy, balanced lifestyle. So obviously increase energy, it can improve our sleep, improves our mental health as well. We've got endorphins that are released, improving our gut health as well. And research is showing us that actually the gut has a huge influence on all kind of aspects of our health, whether it's our physical health or our kind of mental health as well. So actually just kind of moving our body can be really beneficial to our gut. And then of course strengthening muscles and bones as well, which are kind of particularly important as we get older. And then of course reducing the risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, dementia, type 2 diabetes and cancer, just to name a few. And then I've just got this from the government website just to kind of show how actually significantly kind of including exercise in our lifestyle can really benefit or kind of protect us against lots of kind of life associated disease. So this is where our kind of polls will come in, but I wanted to do just a bit of a myth busting with you, just because I know there's a lot of confusing information out there around nutrition, and especially around nutrition and movement or nutrition and exercise, and so I just wanted to kind of get rid of those myths and actually look at, okay, what are the best things to be eating around exercise to kind of fuel me the best. So I will start with the first one, and I'll read it out a couple of times just so that it's clear, and then the poll will come up as well from Izzy. So the first one is, I should avoid fats if I want a healthy pre-exercise meal. So I should avoid fats if I want a healthy pre-exercise meal. So you're either answering true or false there. And I'll give you a few more seconds just to kind of have a little think, and also just pop your answer in. Okay. So it looks like the answers are kind of slowing there. So perhaps we'll end the poll there. So it looks like most of you are kind of thinking false, and there's a few of you that think true, but the answer is in fact false. So it's not, as we saw in the Eat Well Guide, it's not necessarily a bad thing to kind of include fats. We just want to aim for those healthy fats, so the unsaturated fats, and they can actually slow kind of how quickly we digest food. So they can be beneficial in terms of slowing the release of energy. So fat actually kind of slows how quickly the stomach empties, so it kind of helps us keep fuller for longer as well. So actually including a little bit of unsaturated fat can be beneficial.
Freya, just on that point, we had a question from someone in the chat saying, would you advise low-fat yogurt rather than full-fat yogurt? What do you think on that point?
So with lots of things in nutrition, it is kind of down to personal preference. I would watch out for, or look at the label to see what else the manufacturer might be adding, because sometimes sugar is added to low-fat yogurts to kind of improve the mouthfeel. So just watch out for that. As we've seen, kind of having a little bit of fat in the diet is important. It can help us absorb vitamins. It also can help keep us fuller for longer. If you are trying to watch how much saturated fats you're having, or if you just prefer kind of lower fat yogurts, then absolutely go for it. But sometimes people find that they kind of have less yogurt if they're having the kind of the fuller fat version. So it really just depends what works for you and what your kind of goals are, I guess. And I hope that answers your question, and thank you for pointing that out, Izzy. Okay, so move on to the next true or false then. So exercise will burn caffeine off and not prevent me from sleeping. So I'll just read that again. Exercise will burn caffeine off and not prevent me from sleeping. Okay, so I'll give you a few more seconds. I can see there's a few more people left to answer the poll there. Okay, so you're all exactly spot on. So yeah, it's false. So for some people, they find actually having some caffeine before exercise can be really helpful in terms of boosting their performance, or just kind of enjoyment of the exercise as well. However, caffeine does take a long time for our body to kind of to process. So if you are choosing to exercise later in the day, but actually feeling quite tired, perhaps looking at your previous meal or looking at the snack that you're having before your exercise, also thinking about how much water you're having, might be more beneficial than having caffeine. So just kind of bearing that in mind, because we definitely don't want it to kind of interfere with our natural sleep cycle and prevent us from getting a good night's sleep. Okay, brilliant. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so next question then. So exercising whilst fasted burns more fat. And what I mean when I say fasted is when you've completely digested your previous meal and your blood sugar is low. So this is either in the morning when you wake up and you've kind of, you haven't eaten all night, or at least 3 to 4 hours after your last meal. What do we think? So I can see it's kind of splitting the room almost 50-50 at the moment. Kind of keeps changing. I think people are changing their minds. This is a kind of a big well, quite a popular kind of argument at the moment in the kind of diet or physical activity world. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers then. So most of you, it was really tight, but most of you have said false, which is correct. So even though, you know, carbohydrate is our main energy source, so if we don't have enough carbohydrate, we will switch to burning fat. However, that doesn't necessarily translate to burning body fat percentage. As I mentioned as well, when we looked at the kind of carbohydrate section of the Eat Well guide, by not having carbohydrate before we kind of exercise, we're less likely to perform as well. Therefore, we're less likely to kind of use as much energy. So potentially you're using more energy if you do actually include the carbohydrate before kind of exercising as well. It also puts the body under quite a lot of stress, so it can interfere with kind of hormone balance. It can release, kind of having low blood sugar levels and exercising as well can release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which can have an impact on our immune system as well. So it's actually important to kind of have some carbohydrates before we kind of take part in the exercise or any kind of movement as well. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. So exercise is bad for my mental health. So our kind of myth that we got here, or truth or false, is exercise is bad for my health. Okay, so
unanimous decision so far on the polls.
Yeah, I was going to say everyone answered that really, really quickly. False. So yeah, either you kind of knew that already, or, you know, from experience, you know that, or, you know, we did mention it earlier as well. So yeah, exactly. So it is false. As I said earlier, we do get a release of endorphins, which kind of hits the reward centers of the brain. Exercising can make you feel stronger. There's research that shows that aerobic exercise reduces anxiety and stress related disorders, and also things like yoga are really really useful for kind of post-traumatic stress disorder as well. So there's lots of kind of mental health benefits to exercising. Okay, let's have a look at the next one then. So I need to increase my protein intake if I want to exercise. So I'll read that out again. I need to increase my protein intake if I want to exercise. What do we think? So again, it's kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'll give you a few more seconds just to kind of have a think and pop your answer in. I think we've got almost everyone in, and it's about a 50-50 split, which is really interesting. So it's actually false. It's a myth that the more protein that you have, the more kind of muscle gains you'll have. Having more doesn't necessarily mean you'll build more muscle. If you're not, it can get really complicated basically, but anything that you don't, any kind of protein that you don't use or your body doesn't use during the exercise will just be used as an energy source. So the recommended amount is about 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you are really intensely exercising, that does increase slightly, but it's still not a kind of huge amount. And actually kind of as a society or as a nation, we are having a lot more protein than we actually need. And some of the research actually showed that even kind of vegans and vegetarians are having more protein than we say that we actually need. So if you're kind of exercising and just on a kind of a quite casual basis, not kind of training for any kind of big events like marathons or kind of triathlons or anything like that, you probably don't actually need to increase the amount of protein that you're having. And it's more important to kind of have it consistently across the day rather than increasing the amount. So kind of thinking back to the Eat Well guide, thinking about the balance, thinking about, am I getting a little bit of protein in with each kind of snack or meal? Okay, so next one then. There is a 2-hour recovery window post-exercise, and I should consume protein in this time. What do we think? Okay, so again, some very mixed results. Okay. So it looks like that's everyone that's answered. So most of you have answered false. It is false, but there's a little bit more kind of nuance to that answer. So unless you're training within 8 hours again, so if you're kind of doing some exercise and then in 8 hours time you're going to be doing more exercise, you probably would want, you know, some protein within that 2 hours. But actually, if you're going to be having a longer break, the kind of post-exercise recovery window is a lot longer than that. It's about 24 hours. So you don't have to be making sure that you get that in. So when you see kind of people walking around the gym with their protein shake, things like that, not always kind of 100% essential. So again, it's about looking at your whole diet rather than specifically what you're having kind of directly before or directly after, in terms of how that's actually going to kind of influence your muscle recovery and kind of refueling your muscles and things like that. And having said that, a post-session snack would be something that kind of refuels you. So having a little bit of protein and also some carbohydrate as well, and a little bit of the kind of healthy fats as well. So one of the kind of phrases that I like to use to kind of remember this is the 3 R's. So rehydrate, repair, and refuel. Okay, so let's move on because I'm just conscious of the time. So our final kind of true or false. So plant-based diets are not good for exercise. So our final poll: plant-based diets aren't good for exercise. What do we think? True or false? Don't know if the poll has kind of come up for everyone. Unfortunately, I can't see the poll, so I might need to get Izzy just to kind of tell me what the results are.
We've got 100% false.
100% false. Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. Oh, there it is. It's just come up for me. Okay, brilliant. So yeah, plant-based diets are great for exercise. So soya contains all of the essential amino acids, all the proteins that we need. There's lots of other health benefits as well from a plant-based diet as well. So yeah, exactly. Plant-based diets can be brilliant for exercise. So just in summary then, again, kind of looking back at the Eat Well guide, it's more important to look at our diet as a whole in terms of what we are, or how to kind of improve our ability to move or ability to kind of do the physical activity, so across the whole day. Pre and post exercise snacks, kind of aiming for some proteins, some carbohydrates, so that we can kind of give our muscles back what they need, a little bit of fat as well, just to kind of help with satiety or fullness. But then in our other meals and snacks, remembering to include that fruit and vegetables as well. We mustn't forget about the fruit and veg. Okay, so we've got a demonstration to show you as well. So this is a snack that I think you've got the recipe for, so you can kind of create it at home. But we've chosen this just because it kind of hits all of those recommendations for a pre and post exercise snack. So it's got protein for our energy, our muscle growth and repair. It's got oats in it, so we've got a nice complex slow release carbohydrate, and then we've got a bit of fat in there as well for satiety. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then hopefully you should be able to see the ingredients there that Izzy has got ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the recipe, and Izzy will very kindly demonstrate for us. So we've done a little bit of pre-prep beforehand. So Izzy has grated the cheese. She has grated the carrot, and then she's already kind of weighed out the oats ready for us. She's also cooked the diced onion and garlic, so that is ready to go. And then normally you would have kind of preheated your oven and then also just lined your baking tray as well, so that it's all ready to go. So as I said, Izzy has already fried the onions and garlic. And now what she's going to do is mix the cheese, the carrots and the oats in a mixing bowl, and just make sure that they are kind of fully incorporated. But this is basically the same kind of concept as a flapjack. It's just a savoury version. So just, as I said, kind of giving us all those kind of slow release energy from the oats, which we know is kind of great for a snack, great for a lunchbox, and great for that kind of pre or post exercise as well. Okay, so once that's kind of fully incorporated, what we're going to do is we're going to get the egg. Oh, sorry, yes, I forgot. You've got to add the onions and garlic. Thank you, Izzy. Definitely don't want to forget that. Okay, so we'll just wait for Izzy to kind of add that. Okay, so that's looking good. Fantastic. So we've got our egg cracked into the bowl already. Now to this, we just want to add the Marmite or the soy sauce. Obviously, if you don't like Marmite, you can add soy sauce. We're doing soy sauce today just because it's a little bit easier to kind of mix in. But yeah, if you wanted to kind of mix that up, you could always kind of change that, and it just gives us like a nice bit of saltiness. And then to that, we're also going to add the tomato puree as well. So again, just like a little bit of extra flavor and color as well. So just kind of about a tablespoon, and just kind of mixing that to make sure that it's kind of fully incorporated. We're going to mix it again kind of in the main bowl, so it doesn't matter if it's kind of not completely mixed, but this is just useful to kind of to bind the mixture. Obviously the cheese, when it melts as well, will also kind of help to bind it, but it's just that egg that binds it. And then of course we've got the kind of the seasoning in there as well. So once that's kind of fully mixed, Izzy can just add that in to our kind of oaty, carroty, cheesy mixture with the onions and garlic as well. And then Izzy will just mix that so it's kind of fully combined. Just to say as well that you can mix up the root vegetables, so you could use sweet potato, you could use beetroot, things like that. You could add in different spices, maybe some smoked paprika, some fresh herbs. If you've got something growing in the garden or the kitchen or whatever, you could do that. And I can see how long these keep for in an airtight container. So about 3 days as well. So you could have those kind of in an airtight container for about 3 days. So yes, they do last a little while. So you could, cook these in a batch and then have them for kind of lunch boxes or snacks, those kind of few days. So we've got one that we've made earlier as well. Oh, I've actually skipped a stage, sorry, my apologies. So then you want to, once it's mixed, you want to add that into the kind of the lined oven dish that you've prepared. Once it's kind of in there, you just want to make sure that you press it down a little bit, just so that there's not too much air kind of between the oats. You kind of want it to be quite dense so that it kind of holds together once it's cooked. And you should see it should be about a kind of just under about an inch thick. Okay, so once that's done, as you said, we'll just kind of pop that in the oven, and it goes in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. You might just want to check it and see, kind of how brown it's getting. But yeah, just check it after about 20 minutes. And then this is, as I said, this is one that we kind of cooked earlier. So you can see you just kind of chop it in to roughly flapjack sized squares. You can kind of sprinkle some sesame seeds on top, or some fresh herbs, or whatever you kind of like to add to that. And that is something that we really enjoy at Food Matters. As I said, it's a really kind of good snack. I can see a few people are saying that it's making them hungry, which is good. I'm glad that, you know, it's nearly lunchtime. But yeah, and thank you, Amy, for sharing that link again. So do give it a go, and maybe you know, give us a tweet if you do give it a go and try it and you like it. Thank you, Izzy, for sharing that with us. And I'm just going to go back to the slides so that we can just go over kind of a bit of a summary, and just having a quick look at how we can kind of use or implement some of the information that we've spoken about today. So part of kind of changing habits, or kind of trying to introduce new goals, is the behavior change element. So I just wanted to kind of touch on this briefly. You might have heard of SMART goals before. I'm not sure if anyone has, but just to kind of remind you that SMART, the acronym, stands for sustainable, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So thinking about, okay, is this something that I can do long term? How am I going to measure whether I've actually achieved it? Is it something that I can actually do? Is it achievable? If I'm kind of, you know, wanting to start running, I'm probably not going to sign up for the next marathon. I kind of need to, you know, take it realistically. So for the R, making sure it's realistic, and then also giving yourself a kind of a time point to check in with yourself, and the reflection part is really, really important about that. So looking at why it didn't work, or why it did work, you know, what went really well. So when you're planning, thinking about the when, the where, the how, and the why you're doing something. Something else that you can use, which takes a little bit less kind of time, you know, SMART goals can take a little bit of time to kind of plan out, but looking at habit couplings, so using a habit that you've already got at the moment, and adding that on, or adding the new habit that you want to do onto that. So thinking about, whilst I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I'll prepare a snack for later, or whilst I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I'll do 5 squats. Those kind of things. So you're coupling 2 habits, one that already exists and one that you want to adopt. Something else you can use is an if-then plan. So research shows just by kind of thinking about these 2 sentences and saying them out loud or writing them down, you're more likely to achieve the change that you want to do. So an example of this might be, if I don't have a healthy snack on hand, then I will use my backup snack of a Trek bar. So being, again, quite specific with that. Or another example might be, if I'm going out for lunch, then I will buy or order a portion of fruit or veg to have with that meal. It's also really important to celebrate the wins. So when you do achieve your goal or your habit change, celebrate that, whether that's, you know, celebrating with a high five with someone that, you know, someone at home or a friend, things like that, or even just looking in the mirror and saying well done, or even just high-fiving yourself if there's no one there to high-five you, or getting Izzy to give you a round of applause, which she quite often does for me, which is great. But yeah, it just, research, as I said, research shows that actually by celebrating them, you kind of get that release of dopamine, which is that kind of reward hormone, and then you're much more likely to kind of ingrain that habit change. So silly as it sounds, look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you've done a good job. And then finally as well, just using a habit tracker can be really useful. Again, just kind of helping you to reflect, and also helping you to celebrate when you get it. And then I've just done a really simple, and excuse my kind of drawing abilities, but really simple example. There are loads online that you can look at. I just chose to do this because I wanted to be a little bit more colorful, and I wanted to kind of make it relevant for me. So that's just an example. And that again can help you kind of achieve or maintain those kind of habits. So just in summary, some of the things that we have spoken about. So some exercise is better than none. So, you know, there are kind of certain exercise recommendations out there, but actually just some movement is better than nothing at all. You're still going to have benefits to kind of moving around and kind of reducing kind of sedentary habits. It's really, really important to include exercise that you enjoy. If you're kind of you know, hoping to start something or hoping to kind of increase something, make sure that it's something you enjoy. And the same goes for foods as well. If you're trying to add something into your diet, make sure that it's something you enjoy, because then it's much more likely to be sustainable. And also, you know, life is there to be enjoyed, and food is there to be enjoyed. So it's really important that we do that. Limited time. If you don't have much time, think about how you can include these in small amounts, or particularly movement. So I don't know, things like getting off the bus earlier or things like that. So that is still movement, even if it's an extra kind of 5 minutes of walking. There's still going to be lots of health benefits to that. As we just looked at, so kind of using checklists or habit trackers to kind of help us reflect on how our kind of habit changes are going, help us kind of celebrate the wins. Pre-exercise, having something, so not being fasted before exercise. So and then making sure it's kind of mainly carbohydrates, a bit of protein, and some healthy fats as well, because that's what's going to fuel our muscles the best. But then in those other meals, remember, don't forget our kind of fruits and vegetables, because those are really important for keeping the rest of us healthy. And also just remembering that it's you know, our kind of whole diet as well is really important. It's not just about the kind of the pre and the post. Actually, our whole diet has an influence on how well we perform during movement or exercise. And then finally, those 3 R's, which I think are just really nice to remember. So post exercise, rehydrate, repair, and refuel. So making sure we're getting enough water, making sure we're getting those foods that are going to repair and refuel our muscles. Okay, so thank you very much.
We've just got a final question here in the chat from Chandini. Is butter better for us than low-fat spread? What do you think, Freya?
Oh, really good question. So again, I'm going to say that really annoying thing where it's down to personal preference. It depends what your goals are. If you have been, you know, if your doctor's told you you've got high cholesterol, potentially going for a lower fat spread or kind of unsaturated fat spread might be beneficial. However, some people find that actually the taste isn't quite kind of satisfying enough, so they end up having double the amount of spread than they would have done if they just had butter. So it really depends on what your goals are and what your tastes are. If butter is something that you have very little and often, absolutely fine. But if one of your health goals is to actually reduce the amount of saturated fat you're having, and you're having butter consistently at every meal, or, you know, 2 meals a day, perhaps going for a low fat or unsaturated fat spread would be best. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you everyone. I hope that has been useful and educational for you all. I'm just going to do a final poll, which is the same one as we looked at the start. How confident are you now in your knowledge around eating for being physically active? So hopefully you've gained a bit more knowledge during that, a bit more confidence, and you've got some ideas to take forward with you to maybe make those oat snacks. But maybe some other snacks have come to mind, or some other meals. So it looks like most people have replied now, have answered. So I'm just going to share a response. Yes, that's there's been a really big increase. So we've not got anyone on 1 or 2 anymore, which most people, I think most people are on 3 actually, but we had quite a big portion of people on not very confident, or on number 2, just slightly more confident. Now most people are number 4. So that's pretty confident, and we've got quite a lot of people on very confident as well. So that's really great. Good to know that we've increased some confidence today around eating for being physically active. Great. Thank you, everyone. Any final questions or thoughts, Freya?
No, just to say thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. And it's really good to see that actually, you know, you're feeling more kind of confident in that knowledge. And there's lots of kind of information as I said, out there. So it was good to kind of have an opportunity to do a bit of a kind of a myth bust with that, to hopefully make it less confusing.